Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to tackle a growing modern crisis. You know that creeping anxiety about retirement? You work your entire life, you finally hit a certain age, and then, bam, the calendar just clears. But without a structured purpose, that wide open calendar can actually turn into a pretty dark void. Today, we're looking at how an ancient Hindu framework offers a really profound, structured solution to all of this.
So think about it. Modern retirement often just leads to stagnation and this huge loss of identity. Because when you stop producing in the traditional economic sense, well, who are you? What if the answer isn't just endless travel, or trying to lower your golf handicap, or desperately clinging to your old career? What if instead the answer is retreating to a literal or psychological forest? That's exactly what we're going to explore.
Okay, here's our game plan for today. We'll quickly hit the ancient roots of Vanaprastha, rethink modern retirement, build our mental forest, cover some practical downsizing steps, look at a modern daily routine, and wrap up with finding ultimate spiritual liberation.
Let's dive right into Section 1, the ancient roots of the literal forest dweller.
To get started, we need to look at the history of the third stage of the traditional Hindu life cycle. Historically, this stage was recommended to kick off around age 50, and it was usually triggered by a very specific life event. Your children were grown and the first grandchildren arrived. The term comes from Sanskrit, translating literally to forest dweller or retiring to the forest. But here's the thing. It's a crucial bridge between your active householder duties, where you're building wealth and raising a family, and total, final spiritual renunciation. It was never actually meant to be this overnight, abrupt abandonment of your family. It was a deliberate, gradual withdrawal into inner reflection and simplicity.
And this timeline brilliantly illustrates the intense chronological progression of ancient austerity. In texts like the Manusmriti, this wasn't just one static lifestyle. It was broken down into 4 distinct progressive phases. You'd start out moving to the forest, sure, but you're still eating cultivated leftover grains. Then you step it up to strictly wild herbs and fruits. By stage 3, you're practicing severe physical endurance, like standing and facing the blazing summer sun, and completely discarding any stored food. And finally, you reach a stage where you are consuming virtually nothing but fallen leaves, or literally just the froth of boiling waters. You become entirely detached from physical needs. Wild, right? But listen, it wasn't just about starving in the woods. These physical austerities were matched with incredibly intense mental study. They used specific texts known as the forest books, or Aryanikas. The whole point of this stage was shifting your focus from the physical, external rituals of the household to deep, inner meditation. You'd be studying texts focused on breath awareness, ethical mantras of truth, and this core grounding teaching that material wealth simply cannot buy immortality. Your mind had to become just as disciplined as your body.
Moving on to Section 2, rethinking modern retirement and how we metaphorically translate all of this.
Today, obviously, moving to a literal forest and chewing on tree bark isn't really feasible. Honestly, it's not particularly helpful either. So, starting around the modern retirement age of 62 to 65, we have to translate this ancient wisdom for our modern world. Think about the stark contrast between the two approaches. Modern retirement is completely driven by financial metrics, hitting that magic number in your 401k. But the Vanaprastha framework, that is driven by a conscious identity shift. While modern retirees often end up trying to maintain control over their adult children, this framework replaces that with generative mentorship, but crucially, without ownership. So instead of facing an identity crisis and stagnation, you're facing a spiritual evolution. It totally replaces financially driven emptiness with profound purpose.
Let's look at Section 3, building a mental forest by leaving the village marketplace.
To achieve this evolution today, we don't need a physical hermitage out in the woods. We have to create what the source material calls a forest of the mind right inside our own living rooms. In ancient times, a practitioner would physically leave behind the noisy gossip of the village marketplace. But today, that marketplace lives right inside our pockets. We have to physically and mentally leave the noisy village marketplace of smartphones, constant news alerts, and those algorithmic media feeds that are literally designed to agitate our minds. We replace the infinite scroll with strict digital silence. We replace doom scrolling the morning news with reading printed, physical philosophical books. We just have to let the world's daily political drama and endless comment sections move on without our constant attention. Yep, you heard that right, just one. That is the absolute maximum number of times per year you should have to check your brokerage accounts or talk to a financial advisor during this stage of life. The psychological weight of actively managing wealth is exactly what keeps your mind locked in the householder phase. You've got to transition your finances to ultra-low maintenance automated streams.
The ultimate goal here is transitioning from active wealth ownership to automated stewardship. You're shifting your focus completely away from market crashes and onto your spiritual journey. It's all about lightening that karmic load.
Which brings us to Section 4, Practical Steps to Downsize, the Modern Checklist. So, the million-dollar question, how do we actually pull this off today without just abandoning society overnight? Well, it requires a structured, psychological, and logistical checklist. You can systematically deploy these highly achievable steps. First up is the title handover. Step down from your CEO or dominant authority positions in the family business or the household. Seriously, let the next generation make their own mistakes. Second, material liquidation. Distribute your excess assets and heirlooms right now so your mind isn't occupied with managing stuff. Third, transition to a strict consumption diet. Eat simpler, cleaner meals and limit your dependency on luxuries. And finally, ego decentralization. Stop asking, what am I building next? And start using your time for community volunteering and meditation.
Next up is Section 5, the modern daily routine, or how to coexist without clinging.
Let's see how this actually plays out in a functional 7-day schedule. Because the reality is, most of us will still live near or even with our families. The single biggest hurdle in this modern framework is coexisting with family without clinging to control. Therefore, the recommended schedule deliberately balances your day right down the middle. 50% of your time is dedicated to introspective solitude, mimicking that quiet isolation of the forest hermitage. The other 50% is generative presence with your family and community. You are actively changing your psychological focus from managing them to simply observing and blessing them. Let's walk through the actual hours here. Your day starts early, before the rest of the household even wakes up, with the technology-free hermit's dawn. This is strictly for meditation or chanting. Breakfast is minimalist nourishment. You're treating food as fuel, not a luxury. Any work you still do is done with absolute dispassion and compassion, meaning you don't attach your ego to the outcomes anymore. The afternoon is reserved for quiet, drama-free contributions like gardening or reading. And then, perhaps the most important part of the day, the 5 p.m. advisory hour. This is where you rejoin the family, you listen intently to their day, and here is the real kicker. You only offer wisdom if they directly ask you for it. Absolutely no unprompted advice allowed. Finally, Section 6, Finding Ultimate Spiritual Liberation, the final goal. As we clear out all that external noise, automate the finances, and step back from those ego-driven duties, we have to confront the ultimate purpose of this stage of life. I want you to ask yourself this incredibly powerful question. We spend our youth learning and our middle age building, accumulating, and proving our worth to the entire world. But escaping the need to continuously build and prove, that is the very heart of ego decentralization. It's the ultimate freedom. The ancient texts are very clear on this point. The goal isn't just to kick back and relax on a beach somewhere. By embracing this detachment, by intentionally paring down our physical and digital lives, and by looking our own mortality squarely in the eye, we prepare ourselves, not just for old age, but for an enlightened transition. We stop pretending that our material accumulations are going to last forever. And this deliberate, highly structured calibration away from worldly desires is exactly what clears the path to the final stage, sannyasa, total renunciation, and ultimately moksha. That is ultimate spiritual liberation. By doing the hard work in the Vanaprastha stage, you are freeing yourself from the heavy karmic load of ownership. So I'll leave you with this final thought today. Retirement doesn't have to be a void. It doesn't have to be an identity crisis or a desperate cling to your working years. You have the blueprint now. How will you step back, stop proving yourself, and build your own forest of the mind? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.